A cowboy approaches this farmer and asks for a job. The farmer tells the cowboy that he has no vacancies. Yet if the cowboy could do something special, he might consider it. The cowboy says, "Well, sir, I understand animals." "Ha!" the farmer says. "How many times have I heard that before?" In this moment, a cow moves from behind a shed. "So what's it saying, cowboy?" the farmer asks with a wicked grin. "Well, sir," the cow says, "she has some feathers on her udder, and the tickle is almost unbearable for her." The go have a look, and it's true. The farmer removes the feathers, and the cow stops mooing. At that moment, a horse is neighing. "So, what's his problem?" the farmer asks. "Well, sir," the horse says, "there's a nail in the right hind hoof that sticks out and really bothers him." They go have a look, and the cowboy was right again. At that moment, a sheep in the stable baas loudly. The farmer explodes. "Will you just shut up? It was only once, and I was totally stoned." One evening, a man was at home watching TV and eating peanuts. He'd toss them in the air and then catch them in his mouth. In the middle of catching one, his wife asked him a question. And as he turned to answer her, a peanut fell in his ear. He tried and tried to dig it out, but succeeded in only pushing it in deeper. He called his wife for assistance, and after hours of trying, they became worried and decided to go to the hospital. As they were ready to go out the door, their daughter came home with her date. After being informed of the problem, their daughter's date said he could get the peanut out. The young man told the father to sit down, then proceeded to shove 2 fingers up the father's nose and told him to blow hard. When the father blew, the peanut flew out of his ear. The mother and daughter jumped and yelled for joy. The young man insisted that it was nothing. Once he was gone, the mother turned to the father and said, "That's so wonderful. Isn't he smart? What do you think he's going to be when he grows older?" The father replied, "From the smell of his fingers, our son-in-law." On their way to get married, a young Catholic couple is involved in a fatal car accident. The couple find themselves sitting outside the pearly gates waiting for St. Peter to process them into heaven. While waiting, they begin to wonder, could they possibly get married in heaven? When St. Peter showed up, they asked him. St. Peter said, "I don't know. This is the first time anyone has asked. Let me go find out." And he leaves. The couple sat and waited and waited. 2 months passed and the couple are still waiting. While waiting, they began to wonder what would happen if it didn't work out. Could you get a divorce in heaven? After yet another month, St. Peter finally returns looking somewhat bedraggled. "Yes," he informs the couple, "you can get married in heaven." "Great," said the couple, "but we were just wondering, what if things don't work out? Could we also get a divorce in heaven?" St. Peter, red-faced with anger, slammed his clipboard onto the ground. "What's wrong?" asked the frightened couple. "Oh, come on," St. Peter shouted. "It took me 3 months to find a priest up here. Do you have any idea how long it'll take me to find a lawyer?" After getting settled in the new town, a farmer went to church for the first time. He found that the people in the church gossiped and shunned him for his poor appearance. After the service, the preacher went to the farmer and told him that, "In this town we get dressed up for church. But I am but a humble farmer, with no better clothes than these. What shall I do?" "Pray to God," the priest replied. "He will tell you what to do." The next week, the farmer came back to church wearing different clothes, but they were no better than the other set of clothes he had on before. The priest interrupted the service to berate the farmer. "Didn't I tell you to ask God what to wear to come here?" "Yes, sir, you did. And did you do that?" "Yes, sir, I did." "And what did God tell you to wear?" "Well, to be honest, Father, he didn't know. He said he's never been in this church before." A teacher told her young class to ask their parents for a family story with a moral at the end of it, and to return the next day to tell their stories. In the classroom the next day, Joe gave his example first. "My dad is a farmer and we have chickens. One day we were taking lots of eggs to the market in a basket on the front seat of the truck when we hit a big bump in the road. The basket fell off the seat and all the eggs broke." The moral of the story is not to put all your eggs in one basket. "Very good," said the teacher. Next, Mary said, "We are farmers too. We had 20 eggs waiting to hatch, but when they did, we only got 10 chicks. The moral of this story is not to count your chickens before they're hatched." "Very good," said the teacher again, very pleased with the response so far. Next, it was Barney's turn to tell his story. My dad told me this story about my Aunt Karen. Aunt Karen was a flight engineer in the war and her plane got hit. She had to bail out over enemy territory, and all she had was a bottle of whiskey, a machine gun, and a machete. Go on, said the teacher, intrigued. Aunt Karen drank the whiskey on the way down to prepare herself. Then she landed right in the middle of 100 enemy soldiers. She killed 70 of them with the machine gun until she ran out of bullets. Then she killed 20 more with the machete till the blade broke. And then she killed the last 10 with her bare hands. Good heavens, said the horrified teacher. What did your father say was the moral of that frightening story? The child said, Stay away from Aunt Karen when she's been drinking. 3 sisters die in a car crash. All 3 sisters make it up to heaven, where they are greeted by God himself. God opens the pearly gates to reveal ducks everywhere. God says, Welcome to heaven. There is only one rule here. The only thing you cannot do is step on any of the ducks, so you must always watch your step. The sisters are very cautious throughout their first days there. However, the oldest sister accidentally steps on a duck. God then came walking up with this ugly man and handcuffed the man to the oldest sister. God said, As a punishment for stepping on a duck, you will have to spend the rest of eternity with this man. The other sisters, knowing the punishment, take extra caution over the next couple of days. Unfortunately, the middle sister could not avoid it anymore and accidentally stepped on a duck. Again, God walked up and handcuffed a hideous man to the middle sister for eternity. The youngest sister made sure to always watch her step, and after about a month or so, God came walking up to her with an attractive young man and handcuffed them together. God then started to walk away when the youngest sister stopped him and said, But God, I did not step on a duck. To which God replied, Yes, but he did. A man walks out to the street and catches a taxi just going by. He gets into the taxi and the cabbie says, Perfect timing, you're just like Frank. Passenger, Who? Cabbie, Frank Feldman. He's a guy who did everything right all the time. Passenger, There are always a few clouds over everybody. Cabbie, Not Frank Feldman. He was a terrific athlete. He could have won the Grand Slam at tennis. He could golf with the pros. He sang like an opera baritone and danced like a Broadway star, and you should have heard him play the piano. He was an amazing guy. Passenger, Sounds like he was really something special. Cabbie, There's more. He had a memory like a computer. He remembered everybody's birthday. He knew all about wine, which foods to order and which fork to eat them with. He could fix anything. Not like me. I change a fuse, and the whole street blacks out. But Frank Feldman could do everything right every single time. Passenger, Wow, what a guy. Cabbie, He always knew the quickest way to go in traffic and avoid traffic jams. Not like me, I always seemed to get stuck in them. But Frank, he never made a mistake. And he really knew how to treat a woman and make her feel good. He would never answer her back even if she was in the wrong, and his clothing was always immaculate, with his shoes highly polished, too. He was the perfect man. He never made a mistake. No one could ever measure up to Frank Feldman. Passenger, How did you meet him? Cabbie, I never actually met Frank. He died, and I married his wife. A blind pilot walks into a plane waving his walking stick. The passengers all look at each other in disbelief. The flight attendant gets on the PA and says, Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the captain is legally blind, but rest assured, he is one of the best pilots in the world with over 6,000 successful flights. Next, the co-pilot makes his way to the plane, and he is also blind and uses his walking stick to make it to the cabin. The flight attendant gets on the PA and says, Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, the co-pilot is also blind, but rest assured he is the second best pilot in the world with over 5,000 successful flights. At this point, the plane begins to take off from the runway. As it gains speed, the passengers grow tenser. The plane keeps accelerating more and more, and as it approaches the end of the runway, it still hasn't left the ground. The plane is approaching the end of the runway at high speed, and the passengers scream, Oh my God, we're all going to die! Suddenly, the plane takes off and begins its ascent. The pilot turns to the co-pilot and says, The day they stop screaming, we're screwed. A blonde wanted to go ice fishing, so after reading many books on the subject and gathering all of the necessary equipment, she made for the nearest frozen lake. After positioning her comfy footstool, she started to make a circular cut in the ice. Suddenly, as if from the sky, a voice boomed out, "Hey you, there are no fish there!" Startled, the blonde moved further down the ice, poured a cup of cappuccino from her thermos, and began to cut another hole. Again, a voice boomed, "There are no fish there!" The blonde, now worried, moved to the opposite end of the ice, set up her stool, and once again tried to cut the ice hole. Once more, the voice said, "There are no fish there!" The blonde stopped, looked skyward, and said, "Who are you, God?" The voice replied, "No, I am the owner of this ice rink." A fellow decides to take off early from work and go drinking. He stays until the bar closes at 2 a.m., at which time he is extremely drunk. When he enters his house, he doesn't want to wake anyone, so he takes off his shoes and starts tiptoeing up the stairs. Halfway up the stairs, he falls over backwards and lands flat on his rear end. That wouldn't have been so bad, except that he had a couple of empty pint bottles in his back pockets, and they broke, and the broken glass carved up his buttocks terribly, but he was so drunk that he didn't know he was hurt. A few minutes later, as he was undressing, he noticed blood, so he checked himself out in the mirror, and sure enough, his behind was cut up something terrible. Well, he repaired the damage as best he could under the circumstances, and he went to bed. The next morning, his head was hurting, and his rear was hurting, and he was hunkering under the covers trying to think up some good story when his wife came into the bedroom. "Well, you really tied one on last night," she said. "Where'd you go?" "I worked late," he said, "and I stopped off for a couple of beers." "A couple of beers? That's a laugh," she replied. "You got plastered last night. Where the heck did you go?" "What makes you so sure I got drunk last night anyway?" "Well," she replied, "my first big clue was when I got up this morning and found a bunch of Band-Aids stuck to the mirror." Three little pigs walk into a restaurant and are seated at a table. After a few minutes of browsing the menu, they decide to start with some appetizers. The waiter comes over to take their order. "I'll start with some chips and salsa," says the first pig. "I'll have some mozzarella sticks," says the second pig. "Water, lots and lots of water," replies the third pig. They enjoy their appetizers and then decide it's time to order their main courses. The waiter returns to take their orders. "I'll have a double cheeseburger, no onions," says the first pig. "I'll have a dish of macaroni and cheese," says the second pig. "Water, lots and lots of water," replies the third pig again. They devour their meals, and soon it's time for dessert. The pigs flag down the waiter, who asks them what they'd like. "I'll have a slice of cheesecake," says the first pig. "Give me a bowl of soft-serve chocolate ice cream," says the second pig. "Water, lots and lots of water," replies the third pig. After finishing their dessert, the waiter brings the bill. He's a little puzzled and asks the third pig, "Why did you only order water tonight?" The third pig looks up and smiles. "Well, one of us has to go wee all the way home." A man in a hot air balloon realized he was lost. He descended a bit and spotted a woman below. He shouted, "Excuse me, can you help me? I promised a friend I'd meet him an hour ago, but I don't know where I am." The woman below replied, "You're in a hot air balloon, hovering about 30 feet above the ground. Your coordinates are approximately 40 to 41 degrees north latitude and between 59 and 60 degrees west longitude." The balloonist thought for a moment and said, "You must be a programmer." The woman responded, "I am. How did you know?" "Well," said the balloonist, "everything you told me is technically correct, but I still have no idea what to do with that information. The fact is, I'm still lost. Honestly, you haven't really helped me." The woman smiled and said, "You must be a manager." The balloonist asked, "How did you know?" The woman replied, "Well, you don't know where you are or where you're going. You've gotten to where you are because of a lot of hot air. You made a promise you have no idea how to keep, and you expect me to solve your problem, and now, somehow, it's my fault." On their wedding night, the groom, Bob, told his nervous bride, Turn around and lie on your stomach." Shocked, the bride snapped, "Are you crazy? It's done face to face." Bob, confused, replied, "No, it's supposed to be done from behind." The bride hesitated and then muttered nervously, "How would you know? Once, back in college, some thugs kidnapped me. And they did it face to face." Bob's eyes widened, and he quietly sat down, mumbling, "Oh no, those same thugs kidnapped me once too, but they didn't do it face to face." A farmer stopped by a hardware store and bought a bucket and a gallon of paint. Then he stopped by the feed store and picked up a couple of chickens and a goose. However, struggling outside the store, he wondered how to carry all his purchases home. While he was scratching his head, he was approached by a lady who told him she was lost. She asked, "Can you tell me how to get to this address, please?" The farmer said, "Well, as a matter of fact, my farm is very close to that house. I would walk you there, but I can't carry this lot." The lady suggested, "Why don't you put the can of paint in the bucket? Carry the bucket in one hand, put a chicken under each arm, and carry the goose in your other hand." "Thank you very much," he said, and proceeded to walk the lady home. On the way, he said, "Let's take my shortcut and go down this alley. We'll be there in no time." The lady looked him over cautiously and said, "I am a lonely widow without a husband to protect me. How do I know that when we get in the alley you won't hold me up against the wall, pull up my skirt, and have your way with me?" The farmer said, "Holy smokes, lady, I'm carrying a bucket, a gallon of paint, 2 chickens, and a goose. How in the world could I possibly hold you up against the wall and do that?" The lady replied, "Set the goose down, cover him with the bucket, put the paint on top of the bucket, and I'll hold the chickens." Why I'm divorced. I went downstairs for breakfast, hoping my wife would be pleasant and say, "Happy birthday," and possibly have a small present for me. As it turned out, she barely said good morning, let alone happy birthday. I thought, well, that's marriage for you, but the kids, they will remember. My kids came bouncing downstairs to breakfast and didn't say a word. So when I left for work, I felt pretty low and somewhat dejected. As I walked into my office, my hot boss Sam said, "Good morning, and by the way, happy birthday." It felt a little better that at least someone had remembered. I worked until 1 o'clock when Sam knocked on my door and said, "It's such a beautiful day outside, and it is your birthday. What do you say we go out to lunch, just you and me?" I said, "Thanks, Sam. That's the greatest thing I've heard all day. Let's go." We went to lunch, but we didn't go where we normally would go. She chose instead a quiet bistro with a private table. We had 2 red wines each, and I enjoyed the meal tremendously. On the way back to the office, Sam said, "It's such a beautiful day. We don't need to go straight back to work, do we?" I responded, "I guess not." "What do you have in mind?" She said, "Let's drop by my place. It's just around the corner." After arriving at her house, Sam turned to me and said, "If you don't mind, I'm going to step into the bedroom for just a moment. I'll be right back." "Okay," I nervously replied. She went into the bedroom, and after a couple of minutes, she came out carrying a huge birthday cake, followed by my wife, my kids, and dozens of my friends and co-workers, all singing "Happy Birthday." And I just sat there, on the sofa, naked. Little Timmy wanted to take the family dog for a walk, so he went to his mom and asked if he could take her around the block. His mom, knowing the dog was in heat, and not wanting to get into an awkward discussion about the birds and the bees, decided to avoid the conversation altogether. Instead, she told Timmy to ask his dad. So Timmy went out to the garage with the dog on the leash and asked his dad if he could take her for a walk. His dad, not eager to have the talk either, thought for a moment. He grabbed a cloth, poured a little fuel on it, and wiped it underneath the dog's tail to mask the scent. Then he told Timmy, "Go ahead, it'll be fine." About 15 minutes later, Timmy walked back into the driveway, but there was no dog. Concerned, the father asked, "Where's the dog?" Timmy shrugged and said, "Oh, she ran out of gas halfway around the block, but don't worry. Another dog is pushing her home." A man is flying his plane, frantically searching for a place to land as he realizes he's run out of fuel. Despite the emergency, he's a skilled enough pilot to guide the aircraft down and land it gracefully on a small, empty beach. He exits the plane without a scratch. "Damn it, what went wrong?" he mutters, assessing the damage. The propeller is mangled, but the wings seem fine. He notices the landing gear has been torn off and is stuck in the sand about 15 meters away. Optimistic, he figures he can salvage and repair the plane. He heads over to the detached parts and begins digging through the sand. As he unearths a strange chunk of metal, he realizes it's brass, an unusual material for an airplane. Curious, he rubs off the dirt and uncovers strange markings that begin to glow. Suddenly, smoke billows from the metal and forms into a genie. "Thank you, kind stranger," the genie says. "I've been trapped in that lamp for many years. As a token of my gratitude, I will grant you one wish, but be warned, I am a genie, not a fool. Give me good reason not to turn your wish against you." The man thinks for a moment, scratching his chin, then says, "I'm always making the same mistakes. For example, this is my second plane. I can never figure out what I'm doing wrong. Please, Mr. Genie, I wish for better hindsight." The genie raises an eyebrow. "Are you sure this is what you want?" "Yes," the man answers without hesitation. "Done!" With a gust of wind, the genie vanishes and flies out to sea. The man sits down in the sand, looking out at the sunset. "I should have fueled up before I left," he sighs, putting his face in his palms. Then he looks up in horror. "I should have wished for better foresight." Two guys left the bar after a long night of drinking, jumped in the car, and started it up. After a couple of minutes, an old man appeared in the passenger window and tapped lightly. The passenger screamed, "Look at the window! There's an old ghost's face there!" The driver sped up, but the old man's face stayed in the window. The passenger rolled his window down part way and, scared out of his wits, said, "What do you want?" The old man softly replied, "You got any tobacco?" The passenger handed the old man a cigarette and yelled, "Step on it!" to the driver, rolling up the window in terror. A few minutes later, they calmed down and started laughing again. The driver said, "I don't know what happened, but don't worry, we're doing 80 now." All of a sudden, there was a light tapping on the window and the old man reappeared. "There he is again!" the passenger yelled. He rolled down the window and shakily said, "Yes." "Do you have a light?" the old man quietly asked. The passenger threw a lighter out the window, saying, "Step on it." They were flooring it and going about 100 miles an hour, trying to forget what they had just seen and heard, when all of a sudden there came some more tapping. "Oh my God, he's back!" The passenger rolled down the window and screamed in stark terror. "What now?" The old man gently replied, "You want some help getting out of the mud?" A little 10-year-old girl was walking home alone from school one day when a big man on a black motorcycle pulled up beside her. After following her for a while, he turned to her and asked, "Hey there, little girl, do you want to go for a ride?" "No," says the little girl as she keeps walking. The motorcyclist pulls up beside her again and says, "Hey, little girl, I'll give you $10 if you hop on the back." "No," she replies and hurries down the street. One last time, the man tries again. "Okay, kid, final offer. I'll give you $20 and a big bag of candy if you'll just hop on the back and we'll go for a ride." The little girl finally stops, turns, and screams, "Look, Dad! You're the one who bought the Honda instead of the Harley. You ride it!" A girl goes into the doctor's office for a checkup. As she takes off her blouse, the doctor notices a red H on her chest. "How did you get that mark on your chest?" asked the doctor. "Oh, my boyfriend went to Harvard and he's so proud of it he never takes off his Harvard sweatshirt, even when we make love," she replies. A couple of days later, another girl comes in for a checkup. As she takes off her blouse, he notices a blue Y on her chest. "How did you get that mark on your chest?" asked the doctor. "Oh, my boyfriend went to Yale and he's so proud of it that he never takes off his Yale sweatshirt, even when we make love," she replies. A couple of days later, another girl comes in for a checkup. As she takes off her blouse, he notices a green M on her chest. "Do you have a boyfriend at Michigan?" asked the doctor. No, but I have a girlfriend at Wisconsin. Why do you ask? A man is in his boat out on the lake with a bucket full of fish that he had just caught. A wildlife officer spots him and pulls his boat up alongside. Seeing the bucket of fish in the man's boat, the wildlife officer asks to see his fishing license. The man tells the officer that he doesn't need a fishing license. The wildlife officer looks down at the bucket and says, "You definitely need a license to be catching fish. I can see that you've been fishing today. You have live fish right there." The man says, "Oh no, those are my pet fish. I just brought them out here for the day to enjoy the lake." "Pet fish?" replied the wildlife officer. "Oh, absolutely. I let him out of the bucket and they swim around and play, but when I whistle they all jump right back in. They are very well trained." The wildlife officer scratches his chin, then says, "I've never heard such a... Well, I've got to see this." The man dumps the bucket of fish into the lake, then calmly turns and looks at the wildlife officer. The wildlife officer says, "Well, call them back." The man says, "Call who back?" The wildlife officer says, "Your pet fish." "What fish?" replied the man. A woman seated while flying in economy and holding her baby in her arms was startled when the man sitting behind her bent forward to say, "Ma'am, that is one ugly baby you have there." The woman, wide-eyed and open-mouthed, was so shocked she could barely retort. "Well, I never," the man continued. "I'm just being honest with you, ma'am. I mean, I've seen some ugly babies in my time, but yours is a real showstopper." Quite overwhelmed, the woman called a flight attendant over. "The man behind me just hurled the most hideous insult at me, and I demand to be moved to a different seat," she said. The attendant gave her a consoling look of sympathy. "I'm so sorry, but as you know, our flight is fully booked, and until we find someone willing to switch seats, I'm afraid I won't be able to reseat you. We do apologize, however, and if you like, in the meantime, we'd be happy to offer you anything from our in-flight menu free of charge." "Fine," the woman said with an air of resignation. "But I've never been so insulted in all my life. What a horrible man." "Well, I just said the truth," could be faintly heard from the seat behind. Hearing that, the attendant resolved to make the woman feel better as soon as possible, telling her, "Any item of food or any alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage, whatever you choose, it's on us," she said. "And if you like, I'll also bring a banana for your comfort, monkey." A local bar was so sure that its barman was the strongest man in the village that they offered a standing 1,000 pounds bet. The barman would squeeze a lemon until all the juice ran out and challenge any man to squeeze out another drop. Weightlifters and arm wrestlers, they all tried and lost the bet. Then one day a scrawny wee man, if he stood sideways you would not see him, wearing scratched glasses and a 10-year-old polyester suit walked in and said, "I'd like to take on the bet." After the laughter had died down, the barman said, "Okay," grabbed the lemon and squeezed away. Then he handed the wrinkled remains of the lemon rind to the little man. But the crowd's laughter turned to total silence as the wee man clenched his little fist around the lemon and squeezed it, and a drop fell into the glass. Then he squeezed some more, and another drop fell from the lemon. Without a word, the wee man squeezed some more, and a third drop fell into the glass. The crowd in the bar were astonished and speechless as the barman paid the 1,000 pounds bet. He asked, "What do you do for a living? Are you a lumberjack, a metal worker, a weightlifter, or what?" The little man quietly replied, "I'm a tax collector." A man on a train gets up and moves to the doors. A conductor notices and says, "Sorry, sir, this train doesn't stop at the next station on a Sunday night." Seeing how disappointed he is, the conductor says, "It does slow down going through the station, though. Perhaps there is a way I could help you if you like." So as the train slows down, the conductor takes hold of the man's coat collar and lifts him out over the platform. "Start running in the air so you don't fall over as you touch the ground." The man starts running in the air as the conductor lowers him, and he has so much momentum as he hits the platform that he runs past his carriage and comes alongside the next one. The door of that carriage opens and a passenger reaches out, grabs his coat collar, and lifts him inside, slamming the door, saying, "You're lucky there, mate. This train doesn't stop here on a Sunday night."